I have walked this earth for longer than memory itself. I have seen empires rise like morning mist and fall like autumn leaves. Tonight, let me take you with me to a place where knowledge once gathered like stars in the desert sky. Come, drift with me to Alexandria, where the Mediterranean meets the Nile, where scholars once whispered secrets that could reshape the world. Close your eyes, feel the warm sand beneath your feet, taste the salt air mingling with papyrus and ink. We are walking together now, you and I, through time itself, to Alexandria, jewel of the ancient world. The year, let me see. It was 300 years before the one they would call Christ walked the earth. Though for me, time flows differently, like honey poured from a broken jar, sweet and slow and golden. I remember stepping from the ship onto the marble quay of Alexandria's great harbour. Stone was warm beneath my sandaled feet, polished smooth by countless travellers like myself, but none quite like myself. For I carry with me the dust of centuries, the whispers of ages yet unborn. The harbour stretched before me like a crescent moon carved from blue glass. Ships, so many ships. Their sails hung limp in the afternoon heat, white linen against the azure sky. The sound they made, that gentle creaking of rope and timber, like an ancient lullaby sung by the sea herself. To my right rose the Pharos, the great lighthouse. Even now, even after all these years, I can see it clearly in my mind's eye. 400 feet of marble and bronze reaching toward the heavens, its fire visible from 30 miles out to sea. During the day they used mirrors to catch and throw the sunlight across the waters. At night, the flames danced like captured stars. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the Mediterranean breeze lift my travelling cloak. The air tasted of adventure and salt, of distant spices and papyrus scrolls. Alexandria, the city, Alexander the Great had dreamed into existence, now grown beyond even his wild imagination. Around me, the harbour bustled with life. Merchants called out in a dozen languages: Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabian. Their voices blended into a symphony of commerce, a music I had heard in ports from Phoenicia to the distant shores of India. But Alexandria sang a different song. Here, beneath the cries of fresh fish from the Nile and silk from the Far East, ran an undercurrent of something else. Knowledge, the pursuit of understanding. It hummed in the very stones. I began to walk inland, following the great thoroughfare that cut straight through the heart of the city. The Canopic Way, they called it. Broad enough for 8 horses to ride abreast, paved with blocks of pink granite that caught the light like jewels. On either side rose buildings that seemed to touch the sky itself. 4, 5, even 6 stories high, their facades decorated with columns and statues, painted in brilliant blues and golds that seemed to glow in the Egyptian sun. The very air shimmered with heat and possibility. But what struck me most, what made Alexandria different from Rome or Athens or Babylon, was the sound of conversation. Not just the haggling of merchants or the laughter of children, but the low, intense murmur of minds at work. Scholars walked the streets in small groups, their heads bent together, debating questions that had puzzled humanity since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered. I passed a group of young men clustered around an older figure with a magnificent white beard. He held a curved piece of metal in his hands, turning it this way and that in the sunlight. "You see," he was saying, his voice carrying the authority of years spent in study, "if I place this mirror thus and angle it toward the sun." I paused, pretending to examine the wares of a nearby fruit vendor. The scholar continued his demonstration, showing how the curved mirror could focus sunlight into a beam so intense it could light tinder from several feet away. His students gasped and whispered among themselves in Greek. "Master Archimedes," one of them said, and my wanderer's heart quickened, for I recognized that name. Though this was the first time I had seen the man himself, could such a device be made large enough to? But their voices faded as I moved on, carrying with me the image of that brilliant mind at work. How many such conversations were happening at this very moment throughout Alexandria? How many discoveries were being born in the intersection of curiosity and knowledge? The city seemed to pulse with intellectual energy. In doorways I glimpsed men bent over scrolls, making careful notations. From upper windows came the sound of recitation, poetry, mathematics, philosophy. Even the street artists seemed infected by the city's love of learning. I watched one young man sketching the proportions of a column, not for decoration, but to understand the mathematical principles that kept it standing. Alexandria was not just a city, it was a living, breathing university, where the accumulated wisdom of the world had come to rest like sediment in a peaceful harbour. And then I saw it, rising before me like a temple to knowledge itself. the great Library of Alexandria. Even now, centuries upon centuries later, my immortal heart quickens at the memory. Picture, if you will, a complex of buildings covering more than 100 acres. White marble columns stretched toward the sky, supporting roofs of cedar wood brought from the distant mountains of Lebanon. Gardens cascaded between the structures, filled with plants from every corner of the known world, a living catalogue of botanical knowledge. But it was not the buildings that took my breath away. It was the scrolls. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls, perhaps as many as 700,000, they said. Every ship that entered Alexandria's harbour was required to surrender its books for copying. The scribes would work through the night, carefully reproducing each text before returning the originals to their owners. I approached the main entrance, my footsteps echoing on the marble steps. The great bronze doors stood open, welcoming scholars from across the world. Above the entrance, carved in Greek letters 3 feet high, were the words, "The place of the cure of the soul." The cure of the soul. How perfectly they had captured it. For what is knowledge but medicine for the deepest ailments of the human spirit? Ignorance, fear, the terrible loneliness of not understanding one's place in the cosmos. Inside, the library opened like a vast cave of wonders. The ceiling soared 40 feet above my head, painted with constellations that seemed to move in the flickering light of oil lamps. Along the walls, scrolls were organized by subject: mathematics here, poetry there, natural philosophy beyond. The system had been devised by Callimachus, the great librarian poet, who had declared that a great book is a great evil, not because he despised learning, but because knowledge should be organized, accessible, findable. The silence was profound, broken only by the scratch of reed pens on papyrus and the soft whisper of scrolls being unrolled. Scholars sat at wooden tables, surrounded by towering stacks of texts, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of small oil lamps. Some worked alone, lost in contemplation. Others collaborated, pointing to diagrams, debating translations, building upon each other's insights. I found myself drawn to a particular alcove where a middle-aged man worked with intense concentration. Before him lay a scroll covered with geometric figures, circles, triangles, complex mathematical proofs. His fingers traced the lines as he muttered calculations under his breath. This was Euclid, though I did not know his name yet. I watched as he carefully drew a perfect circle, then inscribed within it a series of triangles, each building upon the last. He was working out the principles of geometry that would bear his name for millennia to come. How small he seemed, hunched over his papyrus in the lamplight. How could he have known that schoolchildren, 2,000 years in the future, would study his theorems, that his logical proofs would help build temples and bridges, navigate ships across unknown seas, even guide humanity to the moon itself? I have seen many libraries in my endless wandering. The clay tablets of Nineveh, the bamboo books of ancient China, the illuminated manuscripts of medieval monasteries. But Alexandria was different. Here, for the first time in human history, all knowledge had been gathered into one place. Not just the wisdom of one culture, but the accumulated understanding of Greeks and Egyptians, Persians and Jews, Indians and Babylonians. Standing in that great hall, surrounded by the whispers of scholars and the scratch of pens, I felt the weight of my own immortality more keenly than ever before. These men, these brilliant, passionate seekers of truth, they would grow old and die,